Welcome to the Artists Index. I'm Scott Bishop, your host for this episode. I'm a New Bedford-based singer, songwriter, and sound sculptor making music under the name Scapegoat. I also present the live concert series, Unexpected Music, which features South Coast musicians performing in non-traditional performing spaces around New Bedford. The In Focus podcasts are generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agency supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. I'd like to invite our guest to introduce herself, spell her name, and talk a little bit about who they are and what they do.
All right, Scott, thank you so much. So my full name is Candida Rose Baptista. So that is Candida-Rose-Baptista. But musically, I am known simply as Candida Rose, and I was born and raised in New Bedford, Massachusetts.
And we're happy to have you here because you are such an amazing presence in the city. And I'd like to talk about your most recent efforts and what a presence you are at the New Bedford Whaling National Historical Park, because you are the current artist in residence. This is September 21st when we're recording this. You're wrapping up your residency on the 30th. What is your project with the park?
Yes, it's been an amazing ride, I have to say. So my project with the park is basically just continuing the research that I've been working on. It's been a 20-year project, I guess you could say. But so just working on research that is looking at the Cabo Verdean, Cape Verdean, United States musical connection and legacy. I got a master's in transnational cultural community studies back in 2017, and I started this whole sort of series of presentations that I was doing that was based on my capstone project. And so when this residency came about, it was an opportunity for me to continue, expand that research, and so part of some of the specifics that I wanted to work on with the residency is that there was a booklet that came out of the concert. It was like a program booklet that went along with the concert that I did. So that was part of the project for the capstone. And so the booklet is just, it's a 8x11, bound thing. And what I wanted to do is update it a bit and make it into a book that I could, move sort of forward with it and continue to do some of these teachings, whether it's in universities or schools, public schools here in New Bedford. So that was part of what my objective is just to continue the research. The other thing that I wanted to do in that was to start cataloging some of these old cassettes. My cousin Buddy Andrade gave me these cassettes of I don't know if they were live recordings from the 70s and 80s or just vinyls that people sort of put on cassette. So I wanted to try to sort of catalog some of this music so that we can have a sense of what that music was that they were listening to here in the United States that was like sort of from Cabo Verde. And then again, listening to some of these artists like Al Lopes and his band and what they brought to the table as Cape Verdeans in the United States, and musicians particularly. And the other thing is the reason why my residency is between July and September is because that's what I consider Cape Verdean recognition season, and particularly July, because the beginning of July is Cape Verdean Recognition Month. Beginning of July is Cape Verdean recognition on July 5th, Cape Verdean Independence. There's a whole week that is dedicated to Cape Verdean recognition. And it culminates in the parade, and there's all kinds of different scholarship programs that happen. But my idea was that I wanted to bring to the city the possibility of having an official Cape Verdean recognition month, so that we can continue, and sort of expand all of the activities that happen during Cape Verdean Recognition Week. But right now we're still in a sort of those stages of, talking to the city council, talking to the mayor's office, and talking to all of the organizations that would be involved in making this Cape Verdean Recognition Month something that's really, really, even if it can be more special than it already is, even more special, because it's not just a week, but it's a month.
And what would you accomplish with a month of celebration versus a week?
Well, I mean, we because what happens is there's so much that you try to cram it all into a week, right? And there's so many organizations within New Bedford that are trying to do things in terms of education. So there's not just the parties and the parade, but there's so much to teach about Cape Verdean immigration, what some the heritage and what some of the immigrants brought with them, and why Cape Verdean history, Cabo Verdean history, is so important in New Bedford particularly. So you get a bit more time to bring to have all of the different organizations come together and say, okay, well, the Cape Verde Recognition Committee starts off the month with these activities, or maybe the Cape Verdean Association of New Bedford takes another week and says, okay, we're going to do a bunch of activities here, and then maybe the Bisca Club decides, okay, we're going to do another, and so everybody kind of comes together and just expands on the information, because you can't teach about 500 years of history in 1 week. You just can't do that. You can't, not that you can do it in a month either, but the more time you have to show the richness of the culture, the better it is.
It also seems like the greater opportunities for the individual organizations to shine as well, because
absolutely,
they're not competing with each other during that 1 week. You're talking about carving out a week for one, a week for another, and getting different focuses and different disciplines in there in each week.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just a big hodgepodge of Cape Verdean stuff happening all month long.
Yeah. Let's talk about your heritage, because you talk on your website about how you were, pretty immersed in Cape Verdean culture when you were young, but you kind of drifted away from it. What brought you back later on in life?
Well, I mean, I drifted away sort of physically, but really never emotionally or culturally, because you can't
separate it.
It doesn't go away. It's part of who I am. I always talked about being Cape Verdean and that kind of thing. But what brought me back was wanting to really continue to delve into it. And I have to say that so I moved away. I was a banker for 20 in my from 20 to 40. I was a banker, right? At a bank in Boston, and then late 1990s, there was this merger that happened, and we all lost jobs, and that was a whole nother thing. But what happened was, because I was always in music, I decided to go back to school at UMass Dartmouth in 2001, and when I was there, and I was doing jazz and I was doing world music, realized that. Wait a minute, this world, I'm part of world music, right? Like, I've got world music that I grew up with. I've got world music. I mean, I started singing world music when I was 6. Didn't know what that was, but so I started looking at things, and then I was going through a jazz reel book, and I found a title, Cape Verdean Blues, which was written by Horace Silva. And I was like, wait a minute, what's a Cape Verdean Blues doing in a jazz reel book? And then that just started this whole thing of like rediscovery, like, I know, whatever. And so I started, combining sort of relearning the culture and the heritage that I had within me, and started bubbling up, and then mixing it with the jazz and the R&B and the gospel. That's all part of African American music, right? So just kind of bringing that all together. And I also realized that being at UMass, I was a little bit disappointed that there wasn't more history, Cape Verdean history being taught, because I was feeling like, UMass Dartmouth is in sort of the backyard of, where Cape Verdean American history started. And so I sort of set out to build a curriculum to teach Cape Verdean and Cape Verdean American history through the eyes of music and culture, because I went into the music, I was in the music program. So all of my research, even at that point, as an undergrad, and okay, so I'm an undergrad. I'm going to say this out. In 2000, I was an undergrad at 40 years old. I'm just going to put that
right
out.
on.
So, so at that point, so I set out to, learn as much as I can about the heritage. And so I got to interview people like, God rest his soul, Toy Grace, and I even got to speak to Cesaria Vora at the Criterion, because I had a paper that I had to do. So all of and Royal Hartigan, I love him, if he's listening at all, was one of my professors, and he encouraged me, after I wrote my first paper, he was like, you have to do this, like you have to continue to do this, because there's nobody else that's really doing it in this particular way as a musician, as far as he knew at the time, as far as I knew at the time. So this is something that you have to do. So I just continued. Then, after I got I graduated, I got my CD, I did my CD in 2006, and then started traveling. I started traveling for the Whaling Museum as a sort of cultural ambassador, and just continuing to do all of this having to do with music. And at the time, though, I wasn't. So after I left, let me see, I think I was out of New Bedford for like 10 years. So I was out of New Bedford from like 2009 to 2019, which is when I came back. And so to answer your question, all of all of those experiences made me realize that I need to be home. I want to be home. I want to lend my voice to all that's happening here, so that I can teach more about what the richness of the culture that I come from. And I don't want our voices to be forgotten, particularly in the area where I grew up, right? So I grew up in New Bedford, and I grew up, part of where I grew up was on Acushnet Avenue, between, under where sort of right around where like Route 18 falls right now, like between Union Street, Maxfield, all those streets that go down there. So that's where my sort of young stopping grounds were. And I grew up in Bay Village, and then all these different places around the downtown area where I grew up. I didn't want those voices of the people that were in that area to be forgotten. So I wanted to make sure that in my small way I could contribute to making sure that we're not going anywhere. So.
Well, that leads me to ask, how are the different facets of your residency helping you to keep those voices alive? For instance, how does the book play into that? How do cataloging the old cassettes play into that?
It's history. I mean, you have to continue to, and one of my professors always says, she teaches, saying the names, right? So if I'm saying the names of all of these people as I'm giving these presentations, or if I'm saying the names in a book, that people are going to see, that young people are going to read, then the names continue to stay alive, and the memories don't go away, and there's still questions that get asked about who were these people? Who was Toy Grace? Who was Paul Gonzalez? You know, Paul Gonzalez, if you talk about Paul Gonzalez, I mean, he was the one who helped to rekindle Duke Ellington's career in 1956 when he played at the Newport Jazz Festival, right? Wow. So you continue to talk about these names, July Gonzalez, Ms. Vicky Vieira, who is, the aunt of the great Tavares group, right? So when you continue to say the names and talk about what they did and talk about how they elevated music in their own way, it's important. And so the residency allows me to continue that research and continue the legacy that they left.
And that leads me to point out that it's not just keeping their voices alive locally, it's getting people present to the impact they've had. When you mentioned Duke Ellington and Tavares, like not realizing that local Cape Verdeans or Cape Verdeans in general had this impact on those artists. And I mean, that's a revelation to me. Mm-hmm. And it leads me to ask, what is the value for non-Cape Verdeans of the work you do to get present to the contribution of Cape Verdeans to the city and to broader culture?
Right. So in my opinion, this is my humble opinion, but what I think people in general do not understand is that Cabo Verde, the island. So for those who may be listening, who may not know where Cabo Verde is, right? So Cabo Verde is this a group of very small islands. It's an archipelago, and it's a group of small islands off of the coast of Africa, Western Africa to be exact, off the coast of Senegal. And what people don't understand is that those little islands at the start of what would now be considered to be the slavery, right? The transatlantic slave trade, and even before this transatlantic slave trade, what people don't understand is that a lot of the people that were shipped off to the Americas, to the Caribbean, and to other places like that, they came through Cabo Verde. So they came from places in Africa to Cabo Verde. Then from Cabo Verde were shipped off from there. So there's a piece of sort of globalization that happened that Cabo Verde is a huge part of, that people don't understand or don't know. And I spoke about this when I was a guest on the program. It was a PBS program hosted by Marcus Samuelson,
yes,
foodie, and it was called No Passport Required, Boston. And he did this expose about the Lusophone countries, which is the Portuguese-speaking countries, and the connection between Brazil, the Azores, and Cabo Verde in this area. And what I ended up doing is bringing him to New Bedford, because originally he wasn't going to be coming to New Bedford, not for the New Bedford piece of it, or not for the Cape Verdean piece of it, because he didn't know how important New Bedford was to the sort of the spread of Cape Verdean history into the United States. And so on that program, I explained a little bit about how important Cabo Verde was during that time, mid 1400s, 1500s, to the exploration, all the explorers going around Africa and trying to find all of these lands and that kind of thing, and all of the different explorers that actually kind of went through there, and why that's how we're this mixture of people, because of the mixture that's kind of went through Cabo Verde at the time. So we have a lot more to do with world history than people know. And that's part of my mission too, is to bring this information to schools, not only locally, but, my grander vision is, to go maybe cross country somehow to schools that may be looking at multiculturalism, or schools that may have Africana studies, because of course the Cape Verde Islands are off the coast of Africa, and so geographically it's part of Africa, right? So any schools that may be doing Africana studies, or any of those kind of diversity, looking at diverse cultures, and wanting to know, any universities that are out there wanting to know more about diverse cultures, that's where I want to come in and say, hey, have you heard of Cabo Verde? So yeah.
At this point, do you have a plan or the beginnings of a plan for how that would work? Because you have a book that you're creating out of this. That seems like a great platform for jumping off and say doing, speaking engagements, speaking tours around it.
Yeah, so we're working on this little book, and this the book is really more right now sort of a chat book. So what I'm working to do, what I'm hoping to do is if I have this little chat book of the booklet that I did, the booklet that I did has all these different sections, right? And so hopefully to expand all of these sections and make it a bigger book. My vision actually is to have a book that's called something like I think I mentioned it earlier, Cabo Verdean and Cabo Verdean American history through the eyes of music and culture. So that's the big textbook I'd like to have to build a curriculum around, right? So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it that has also come out of this is when I was doing my research in 2016, I went to Cabo Verde and I was there for 6 weeks. And so there's also a documentary. I'm going to say this out loud. There's a documentary called Candida.
There should be.
And one of my professors, Dr. Rosalind Negron, saw it fit to actually send a videographer to Cabo Verde to meet me in Cabo Verde the last week that I was there. And he sort of captured, I had a performance there, and then he captured my going back to my island, which is Brava. And he captured my going to Fogo, which is another island that's very close to Brava, and caught this sort of some really beautiful interactions with myself and one of the musicians that I was interviewing for my research, and all of that. And so the documentary, so it's that week, and plus what they ended up doing was taking some of my sort of personal videos and then interviews that I did and interspersed them through this, interspersed my performance and these videos and made this like 45-minute documentary. And so what we're looking to do is take the documentary and sort of build a bit of a curriculum around that as well. Like, questions that could be asked about identity and place and the importance of all of these kinds of things. So that, matter of fact, I'm already doing. I think I have a presentation that I'm doing at Berklee College of Music in November, and also Tufts University in November. And so hopefully that'll be the sort of the starting off of, this is what I can, these are the things that I can do with maybe a book and a documentary, as well as.
Where can folks view that documentary?
I'm sorry?
Where can folks view that documentary?
No, right now, it's still, we're still working on it. I mean, I've shown it as part of my presentation through the residency, like with my first AHA night with the residency, we screened it, and then I also screened it the second AHA night at the Cape Verdean Vets Hall, but we haven't sort of released it yet to be able to be viewed publicly just yet. There's some things, some edits, a few tweaks. So once I know that, I will let you know. Once I know when folks can see it more widely, you will be the first I will tell.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. I'm excited about it, particularly to see you in Cape Verde, talking about the history and music. And that leads me to ask, how does music work for you as a tool for communicating these things?
It's the only tool I use really at this point. I mean, I've been getting more used to speaking and doing things like this, but my voice through the music has really been what people have been hearing, and it's it's the, like you said, the tool where, you know, even when I talk about the program, they found me through the music, right? They found me because I have a CD that I'm singing in Cape Verdean Creole, and I'm, you know, singing in English. I'm singing in Cape Verdean. I'm my website talks about the traveling that I've done, singing in Cape Verde and those kinds of things. So it's the music that helps people find me, and it's the music that I think people connect to. I remember telling somebody a story about one of the first times I did a jazz gig in Warwick, I think it was, and I was singing all of my, you know, doing all my jazz stuff, and but I, because I had discovered Horace Silver, and I had learned about another Cape Verdean song, Cape Verdean American song, I should say, um, that Miss Vicky Vieira did. I incorporated them into my jazz set, and so I sang these songs. And I went on to call what I do Cabo Jazz, right? So I'm singing these two. I sang these two songs, and at the end of the at the end of the gig, this woman came up to me and she was like, I really love your voice and I really loved all the songs that you did, but when you sang in your language, is what she called it, and because you know, and Creole is my second language because I was born here, but she said when you sang in your language, you literally transformed. And when I tell the story, I get a little, I get a little choked up because it's still, it's so vivid. She said, you actually changed when you started to sing, and I saw something, and that's what I connected with. And she said, I don't know what you're planning to do with that piece of it, but you really need to look into doing more of that, because people will connect with your soul. And not that the other things that you were singing were not beautiful, because they were, but those songs helped me to really connect with you. And I didn't even understand what you were saying, but I connected with that. And that's what you need to continue to do. And that was in maybe 2001, 2002. And that woman, I don't even remember her name. I don't even know if I knew her name at that point either, but wherever she is, God bless her, because that's what helped me to understand how important the music that is within me, that comes from within me, how important it is for that voice to be heard, for other people to see and hear and know the richness of a culture that most people don't know about.
It's also the power of music that you don't need to understand the language to get the emotion behind it. And I was struck by that the last few days listening to The Sum of Me, the record, you know, because there's a lot of power in you going back and forth from English to Creole. You know, I don't understand the Creole, but I get the emotion behind it and the feeling of the music. And there's a lot of power to that. There's an element of mystery too, since I don't understand the language, but it gets to like the core thing of what music does, which is it gets to your heart. And it can get to your heart without necessarily using words people understand. I will say my favorite is the title track, because you go back and forth, and I love the fact that you're speaking directly to us and then singing, and then also it's kind of a subversive song, The Sum of Me, because it's like, I'm going to lay this out for you. I've taken you on this ride through the first 9 songs of this record. We've had good times, we've had sad times, we've had emotional times. Now I'm going to lay out the sum of me. And it's just really powerful, Candida. And I was wondering if you could talk more about this idea of the sum of me and the sum of us, because it's a through line in your work, at least going back to that record. It's a part of this project.
Yes.
You know, what is the importance of talking about the sum of you or the sum of us?
So first, thank you for that, Scott, because it's really a beautiful, really beautiful piece of that project. And I wanted to give credit to Everett Hoagland, who then was a professor at UMass Dartmouth, and has become a very, very dear friend and musical, poetic collaborator. And he was the one that wrote the poetry and called it "Some of Me," and gave it to me as a gift for graduating from UMass Dartmouth. And when I read it, it just like just like what you said, it hit all of the different pieces of who I am. And when I had and he took the name from my recital, my graduating capstone recital in 2005, and that what I called "Some of Me." And what I wanted to do was give people a little bit of everything that I am, because that's what we as Cabo Verdeans, we are a little bit of everything, right? So like I used some as, some is the total, but SOME, which is a little bit, kind of just like, okay, this is a little bit of everything who I am, and just continuing to share a little bit of everything of who we are. And then the sum of us, like you said, it just kind of goes from one thing to the next. And when I saw the poem and I read it and then decided, okay, I'm going to translate "Some of Me," un poco di tudo, which means a little bit of everything, right? It just made sense to continue with that. And then as I did my research in 2017, 2015 through 2017, it just made sense to sort of just continue with that theme, because it makes a lot of sense, because that's who we are, especially Cape Verdean Americans. We're just a hodgepodge of all kinds of stuff.
That brings me to the different, styles and influences you bring into the music, because jazz seems like a foundational aspect of what you do, R&B, pop. How do you bring those things together with, Cape Verdean music and influences?
Well, I think for me, I think Horace Silver was part of that learning process for me, because he, was a jazz musician, but you could hear clearly in his music that he was bringing in Cape Verdean elements. Like as soon as I remember, Marcus Montero was one of my classmates, and I said, Marcus, because at the time I was still learning how to try to read music, so I was like, Marcus, can you play this melody line for me? I want to see what this sounds like. And he played it, and automatically it was like, yeah, that's Creole, that's Cape Verdean, right? And so just putting together, like for instance, we did Afro Blue, and Afro Blue, of course, is this amazing song written by Mango Santamaria, and of course taken to other levels by John Coltrane. But the sentiment, Afro Blue, is it's part of that thread that kind of goes through my CD, right? This thread of wanting to connect with this country that I am from, right? So Afro Blue, it made sense. And as I was learning at the time about other Cape Verdean music that I may not have been, that I did not know a whole lot about, like the Batuque and Funana and Financian, it just made sense to me, like, okay, I'm going to this music that I'm discovering too, this Batuque rhythm, it just makes sense because Batuque is from our African side, right? So we got the Batuque from our African side, couple it with Afro Blue, it just made a lot of sense. So and things like that. And then, the Saudade, and then putting this sort of, there's a wonderful jazz, not jazz, Cape Verde musician who has plays sax beautifully. His name was Luis Moraes. And, thinking about some of the music that he does, I wanted to bring in the saxophone onto sort of a typical Cape Verdean song. And then I had heard Ella Fitzgerald, I forgot what song it was, and she had this song that had this beautiful violin solo, and I'm like, oh, that sounds like it could be Creole, because of course we have, from our Portuguese side, we have the influence of the strings. So I was like, okay, and I loved that all anyway. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this beautiful jazz song that I do, and put this rhythm moderna under that. So it's just kind of combining, just the two, and see what they do.
It's a powerful mix, Candida. I've been listening to the record the last few days. I have to ask, I know you've had singles out in the last year. Do you have more new music coming in the relatively near future?
Yes. So I'm working on a CD, and the CD is going to be more. So we talk about the sum of me, right? It's going to be more about the spiritual aspect of who I am and what I bring into this. So, like, if you listen to the record "Some of Me," there's a song on there called "For All You've Done for Me," or "Para tudo que vous fazer para mim," which is my thank you God song. And so this next CD is still going to have all of the elements of my culture, heritage, growing up, but it's all coming from a spiritual place. So the songs that are out right now, "Love Each Other Through," is one of them, and that one we're working on doing a bonus track that is translated to Creole. And
Nice.
I'm also working on a track on the CD that's going to be a Creole track that's going to be dedicated to the memory of my mom, who passed away when I was only 14 months old. So, and that one I'm writing in Creole because I wanted to do that in Creole for her. So it's a hodgepodge of all kinds of stuff.
But your hodgepodge works because it turns into a stew in the best possible way, because there's no, like with the "Sum of Me," there's nothing jarring about the transitions from one piece to another, or transitioning from English to Creole. It all flows really beautifully, which is another reason why I love the final track, which is kind of pulls all of those different elements together.
It's a musical cachupa.
Let's talk about your musical beginnings, because you've been singing pretty much your whole life, haven't you?
I have. So I tell the story of, I remember learning how to sing a song, and I think it was my first song that I remember happens to be a Cape Verdean song. I mean, I don't know. I might have sang an American song before that, but the song I remember is a Cape Verdean song called "Chapéu de Paja," which means a straw hat. A song about a straw hat. And I remember learning how to sing that song. And I think I was like 6 or something. And so I've been in talent shows and things like that, beauty pageants. I mean, I was in a pageant at I was 8 in Bay Village. I think I got like Miss Bay Village or something like that at 8 years old, and I think I sang something. I don't know. I remember at 12, I remember entering a talent show when I was going to Carnegie Academy at the time. So I've always, and people who see me now who knew me when I was like a teenager, like they were like, yeah, no, I'm not surprised, because you were always singing. You were always the one that was on the porch singing something, So yeah, and it just didn't work out in terms of doing it younger, because a lot of time, I look at myself right now, as you can tell, if you do the math, you'll know that I'm in my early 60s, and most people are retiring from music at this point. Like most of the people that I know, including like my cousin Jackie Santos, is he's sort of at the to he not I'm not going to say at the end of his career, but he's teaching. He's been doing it for 30, 40 years, and other people like that, where I'm just hitting my stride at the moment. I'm like just at the beginning, but I had always been doing music in some way, shape, or form, even though, like, from I mentioned earlier, from 20 to 40, I was a banker, but I was also, I was raising my children, and but I was in bands. My children will tell you that they remember they remember Ray Waters, God rest his soul. They remember my taking them to Ray's house, and we had a band called Chill Factor, and this is like mid '80s or something, and they'll tell you that they remember sleeping on his sleeping on a couch in the basement while I'm while we're singing and whatever. So yeah, I always stayed with it, and then I joined my church, and I was at the time. I was with my Baptist church, Union Baptist Church, for 25 years. I'm on a different spiritual journey at the moment, but they were very instrumental in my learning the spiritual musical piece of who I am. Gospel, and I did a lot of that kind of singing as well. And so yeah, and even I have to tell this story. Even at I worked. I'm going to say where I worked at Bank of Boston. They don't exist anymore. But I worked at Bank of Boston in Boston, and even with them, because I worked for them from 1981 through like 1999, and even with them, they knew that I was a singer, and they would call me to do stuff like the United Way, talent shows and things like that. And there was one particular thing where they needed someone to fit a carrot outfit, because there were these 3 vegetables that were going to be down in the cafeteria talking about cancer prevention or something or other, and the carrot couldn't make it. So it was a very beautiful carrot outfit. It was just this orange sort of shiny lame dress with a carrot top at the top, with like a carrot,
it wasn't like a baseball mascot kind of thing where 50 people would warn it.
No, it was very beautiful, but with the headdress, the head was the hat, or the whatever, the headdress was this beautiful green this green stuff, and I looked like a carrot. So I was the one they called and said, hey, we couldn't, it was an acting, I don't know, some acting company, and they couldn't, I don't know, the carrot got sick or something. So they were like,
carrot got sick.
The carrot got sick. Would you please come in? And hey, I got paid for a full day of being a carrot. So it's all good. So I've always been, so the transition for me, leaving the bank, I had been praying about wanting to go back to school to get my degree in music, because I was teaching choir, and I had never really, I took voice lessons here and there. I took piano lessons here and there, but nothing really formal. So I had been praying about maybe I should go back to school and get a degree in music, and losing my job at that point was probably the best thing that ever happened, because here I am speaking with you, Scott, about all the great stuff that I've done in the last 20 years. So
yeah, I mean, it's not the outcome anyone really hopes for. I want to lose my job is not usually on people's minds, but and I've experienced it too since living in New Bedford, because I got laid off a few months before we moved here, and I would say, being in the role of, my main job is stay-at-home dad, but doing stuff like this, talking with you, doing music, putting on shows, like, I feel like I'm kind of in a similar state of, I'm hitting my stride as a music person now.
Right. Exactly.
Because I don't have that job. And of course, I'm very privileged to not have to go get that job in order to do that stuff the way I used to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my goal when I went back to school, my goal was I want to make music my full-time career. And what people don't know, and I think this is important, that during the day, my day job is I sing. I get to sing for nursing homes, assisted living, adult daycare centers, senior
Yeah,
centers, and the joy that I know that I bring with me um, to these places, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's not easy being your own boss. It's not easy having to do all of it, be the creative and be the business person and and be the social media person and be all of that and be a solopreneur if you will.
yeah.
Um, but this is what I've been doing for the last 15 years plus now. Um, and with all of the ups and downs that come with it, I wouldn't have it any other way. I really feel like for me that it was a blessing that I didn't, because I probably would never have left. I
Yeah.
probably still would be a banker if that didn't happen.
I would be in my
So
old job too if they hadn't laid me off.
right.
If I could have moved down here and worked remotely, then I would have jumped on that. But it's funny how things play out. And I also want to say that the fact that you got laid off has clearly been a blessing for other people, like the
Oh,
seniors that you entertain, the people that you've impacted with your work, researching and disseminating Cabo Verde culture is just amazing. You've had a huge impact. You're one of my absolute favorite folks in town. It's really a treat to talk with you. I want to ask you if there's anything we haven't covered that you would like to talk about.
oh my. There's always so much, right?
I
Because
know.
like how do you put 60 years into like an hour, right? Well, I think the one thing is, first of all, I want to just say thank you to, and I can't name names because if I start naming names, I'm going to forget somebody. But of course, my immediate family. You know, I want to, I don't know. Leon, he knows who he is. Who has always supported me, my daughters, all of my daughters, my grandkids. I just want to be able, I did all of the people who just continue to support what I do, whether it's with a kind word or, whether it's that person that stops me and say, "You look familiar. Where have I seen you from?"
Let me
And
sing and you'll find out.
it's um just there's way too many, because none of us do what we do in a vacuum, right? None of us um can get to that next place in our evolution without the people that we love and even the people that we don't even know, but the people that are, watching us or listening to us or, all of that. So I just want to say thank you to everybody, the people who put us, the people, oh, like, no, see, I'm not going to name names because if I start naming names, I'm going to forget somebody,
Slippery
but,
slope.
but the people that, right. So, but the people that put me on the radio, the people who bring me in to perform, all of those, everyone, all of my mentors, I've got lots of business mentors. You all know who you are. I've got, musical mentors. I've got, friends, and it's just on and on and on and on. And I just love this community. I love New Bedford. I love my community. And then I have, I'm meeting a whole lot of people that are not from here either, but that are also, putting their arms around me and putting their hands under me to continue to lift me up. Um, my spiritual, all of the different spiritual families that I've had and continue to have and that are growing. It's a lot. So I want to just say thank you to everyone. And I do want to let people know that I do have a website. I don't know if that's, can I say that? Can I?
Yes,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can tell them absolutely.
Oh yeah. So if you haven't been to my website, it's candidarose.net. It's always in evolution. So I'm sure that there's more things that aren't there that should be there. But it's definitely a landing place. There's social media, so Facebook, and I've got Facebook stuff, got Instagram,
Your work's on the usual
LinkedIn.
streaming suspects, as I call them. You're on
Yes,
Bandcamp.
all of those. Yeah, well, not all of them, but some of them. Um, so yeah, so find me, find me on all of those places.
And don't forget to check Candida's calendar because you're out there quite a lot performing. Your residency wraps up on September 30th, but you'll be doing more work with the park because your actual project isn't over. So certainly hope to see you there doing more stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the residency wraps up officially on the 30th, but I think that this Saturday, so this I don't know when people are going to be listening to this, but
This will be a couple of weeks out, honestly.
oh,
So by
okay,
the
all right.
time, unfortunately, it will pass by the time.
Oh, okay. So,
Uh,
but yeah. So on Saturday the 24th, then there's a movie that I'm part of, that another wonderful artist, visual artist, performing artist, Eva Brito.
oh, Eva's great. Yeah.
Yeah, so she co-produced this movie called Pandemic Renaissance, which is about how the artistic community and cultural community in New Bedford made it through the pandemic. And so she's going to be screening that on the 24th. So if you haven't seen it, be kind of be looking out for that coming out as well. And I was part of that movie. I was interviewed for that movie, and my song "Love Each Other Through" is also on that. And that's the other thing I want people to do is if you could please go and listen by "Love Each Other Through," because my dream with that particular song is to reach 1 million people with the message of the song. And if you listen to the song and just listen to the message, you'll understand why I want to reach like 1 million people worldwide, if not more. So
It's
that's
a
my
powerful and important
that's my
message.
big push right now.
Absolutely. Well, may we wrap up by me asking you my 5 standard questions I ask everyone. I call them the 5 queries of unknown origin. Candida Rose,
Oh
will you answer
gee.
these questions for me?
Oh
What
gee.
is your first musical memory?
So my first musical memory is singing Chapelle di Paja.
You've already shared it. What's one record you would take to a desert island? A must-have record, could be a song, could be a full album. I know I'm limiting you to one, but
I don't care how you get here, just get here if you can.
Alita Adams?
Huh?
Is that Alita Adams? I'm trying to remember.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
great singer.
I think that was written by Brenda Russell, though.
You are right.
Alita Adams sang it, but it was written by Brenda Russell.
Popularized it. You are absolutely right. Who's a super secret, sneaky influence on you? Someone that people might go, really? I didn't realize that person would be an influence on Candida Rose.
Oh man. Who? Oh man, this is too many. I can't even think of like one. I don't know.
Pass.
I can't answer that. I'm going to pass on that one because I don't know. I can't. There's too many to think of.
I got it. Who's a musician, dead or alive, you would want in your band?
A musician. Oh, Sheila E.
Sheila E. Oh, I love that answer. I love Sheila E. Fantastic singer, great percussionist and drummer. Good Lord.
Yes. Man, if I could travel with Sheila E., I'd be set.
I think a lot of us would be happy having Sheila E. in our bands, man. Oh, she's unbelievable. Last question. What is your South Coast happy place?
The harbor walk on the East Beach side of New Bedford, that walk over there. Yeah.
That is a lovely walk.
That's my happy place. As far as a physical place, that's my happy place. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Candida Rose, thank you for taking time to talk with me and the Artist Index. Looking forward to seeing and reading and hearing everything that comes out of your residency once you complete those aspects of your project. I just wish you all the success in getting that project done and getting the word about Cape Verde culture out there.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's such an honor to be able to speak to you. Uh, I really loved the work that you've done, and I've
Thank you.
also, been honored to, be on the same stage with you as well, and
Yeah,
knowing that I'm coming behind you with in the residency. So I'm very honored and blessed to have this opportunity to chit chat with you too, because you've been an inspiration as
thank
well.
you.
Thank you. And yes, Cabo Verde, Viva Cabo Verde.
Right on. All right.
Love it, love it, love it.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great conversation. I appreciate you taking the time, and let's get the word out about the work you do.
All right, thank you. I appreciate
Oh, my
that.
pleasure. It was a blast. I learned a ton too, which is what I love about doing these. Thanks for joining us for another In Focus podcast, which is generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agencies supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. I'm Scott Bishop, and thanks for listening to The Artist's Index.